Howdy, let's talk about Agarta, an FMV game made out of Turkey. It's in the Turkish language, and it's a game where you play a serial killer, and the choices you make depend on what you want to do with the serial killer, as well as what you, the player, want to see happen next. So just like any FMV style game, you're watching a lot of the time, most of the time, and then every once in a while you'll be picked with a dialogue option to choose what happens next. Now, to compare to other games that I've played that are FMV style, sometimes they'll have like mini games in between to kind of add a little gameplay into the experience, so it's just not constant FMV all the time. It has games that are mini or require rhythm or timing or something to kind of keep the player engaged. This one, however, is the first one I really played that didn't have any of that. At least with the playthrough I did. I played through the game one time. Again, this is an FMV game, so there are several different playthroughs you can do, but the experience that I had with it, it seemed like there was no mini game, there was no rhythm, there was no gaming experience in between. The whole experience was set on just making decisions, selecting A or B. And that's what took me through from the beginning to the end. And I could see a lot of different pathways this game could go, depending on how you choose for the serial killer to react, depending on how you want the situation to be handled next. There's a variety of paths. You can kind of see all the options that may be available if you decide to replay it. So the game starts out with that classic cat and mouse sort of thing where the serial killer gets himself turned in, and then there's the detective who's all high and mighty, and then they challenge each other. Again, you've seen this a million times before. But it does get a little interesting as you continue through, because at a certain point you get the choice of finding out the backstory of one of these characters. And I wasn't sure at the time if I was like stuck with one or the other, and I will say, at least for my experience, when you choose somebody, you're kind of stuck with that person. So I was like, oh, well, the serial killer would be interesting, and then it gives me the option later, I'll go find out more about the detective. But as the game progressed, I only was able to stick with the serial killer's background and story, and it never really gave me the option to divert back to the detective to find out his story. So you would have to play through the game again to experience the story of the detective, like for me or whoever other person that you didn't choose. And so because of that, there was a portion where towards the end, there was a character that got introduced that seemed to have a major impact, at least on the detective character, but it didn't really mean much to me at all in the player, because this is the first time I've seen this character. And I'm like, oh, I can see a glimpse into what the detective's backstory would be, or what it's about at least. And it does seem there's a commonality there. It seems the idea of fathers is the common thread between these characters, as you get to learn like why the serial killer is doing what he's done and the history of that. And then there's a couple other side characters. There's people that work for the main crime unit that are kind of trying to control how the case is going, but then serial killer has other plans in terms of leaking stuff to the press. And then, you know, you have this back and forth of trying to control the situation, but the serial killer just keeps adding stuff to make it more chaotic. And, you know, the story does wrap up. It does have a conclusion by the time you get to it. Again, there's several different routes you can go. I played this on PC. The production value looked pretty fancy. It seemed like the game was using 4K, at least that's what the developer was explaining with the information I got. But I will say at times, though, that it felt sort of low budget, but that's what these FM games give me usually, that feeling of a lower budget sort of thing. So it was filmed with these really cool cameras, and it looked really good, but it did feel like, you know, they have these certain locations they can use, and they're gonna just kind of plop down and use what they got there. And then again, the most of the game that I had played, it all took place in one building, like the police station or the interrogation room, and then that was it. And then periodically it would go to other locations, but they were small apartment settings, not big, huge public areas with a bunch of people around. It didn't happen too often. a lot of the times you could hear people kind of off screen, and you get the idea that they filmed these actors in this scene and then added, you know, some dialogue after the fact in post. You can get that vibe, you know, and it's a little bit charming with these sort of games that they have that to it. It makes it a little bit different. But it did feel just like watching the video, even though it was filmed in the high def, like the video, the movements of the people, it just felt off. Something about it didn't feel right. It didn't feel like it flowed. It's like the only way I can describe it. Okay, so here's the thing about this game. I'm not gonna lie, it was boring. It was kind of boring to me. It just wasn't too exciting. For the concept of what it is, it should be drawing you in as this like big thriller sort of stuff. And again, we've seen this a lot before, but when it works, it works. And for me, none of the beats just hit for me. It was, I don't know if it was just the way it was acted was kind of cheesy, and it didn't help too that sometimes the translation of the subtitles didn't quite match, and it always kind of takes you out of the experience in the moment. So to have that in this like thriller intense moment and then the dialogue be off, it takes you out of it right away. And it felt like the guy playing the serial killer was just like a little too over the top and almost a little cartoony. It was a little too much overacting from him and the main detective. Again, you expect a little bit of that from these FMV games, but when you play an FMV game that's supposed to be kind of silly, which a lot of these are, you know, they're fun, silly, like romantic ones, a little bit cheesy, but that's what makes it work. Whereas this one, compared to all the others that I played, was 100% serious. It wasn't really supposed to be silly or goofy. There was maybe a comedic beat here or there, but the tension of it was supposed to be kind of this intense drama. It didn't work with this FMV style setting for it to supposed to be this intense thing. And so it felt like it didn't fit the genre per se. I'd be curious to play any other kind of serious thrillers in this FMV space. I know there's a couple other ones at least, but this definitely did not feel like it vibed or meshed really well. And not having any sort of mini game and all that in between, it's just, again, pointing and clicking to the next moment. As much as I love watching and I like walking sims, all that sort of stuff, it just, the performances, the subtitles, it all just took me out of the game, and I was just kind of waiting for the experience to be over. And the experience isn't that long. It's like 2 hours, maybe, if that. But it just felt like it dragged, and I didn't really care so much about these characters after a certain point and where it was going. And I just saw it through to the end. And it kind of ended, it was just kind of like, it's fine. I don't feel the urge to go back and replay this to get a different experience like I did with some of the other FMV games that I played. To wrap it up, if you're looking for a new FMV game to try out, it's hard for me to recommend this one. I feel like there's so many other ones that are a little bit more entertaining out there. And this one just kind of felt dull and boring, which is weird considering what the subject matter was.